Hey, welcome to season 2 of Talk3D. Today I have an awesome guest with me. It's Brandon Dale from DaleSabers. He is a prop maker and a Sabresmith. He makes lightsabers. And he's gonna talk to us about his craft, his passion, and how he's bringing technology of 3D printing and CNC to the filmmaking community. So let's hear what he has to say. Welcome, and I just want to start off with maybe the big pieces in the back because that's just glaring at us and we got to talk about it. Tell me about the helmet.
Well, the helmet came from Thingiverse. It was one of the many remixes of it. Unfortunately, I don't recall the which remix it was, but the design of it really caught my attention. It was like, oh, I gotta have that for my own armor when I joined the Mandalorian Mercs.
Right.
And it was just grabbed onto me, and my wife was like, just make it when you get that new printer.
And you printed that. I mean, there's a reason we put it in the Raise 3D because
I made it on my my first large format printer, which was the Raise 3D Pro 2 Plus.
Right.
And I got that at least 6 years ago now.
Wow. Okay. So that was that the reason why you got that, or?
I got that originally to use on Star Trek Discovery when I was planning to go back there. But circumstances changed and I took my toy and went home.
Right, okay. We're definitely going to get into your film career. But before that, tell me about the jetpack, because that's obviously a little bit too big to fit into the Raise.
Yes, that guy was also printed on the Raise, but in multiple parts. I would say, if I remember correctly, 6 pieces. It came from Marco of Mystery Makers, a very talented model maker. And the guy's work just blows me away. He designed that based off of Paz Vizsla from his appearance on Star Wars The Mandalorian. And he did the full armor of Paz's set. So the jetpack, the shoulder bell here, like, unfortunately this is just dusty and scratched up from being stored around too much, but I like the damage detail on here, so I'm going to be keeping that.
And I mean, these look completely professional, so you've obviously finished this. You know, what did it take to get from 3D print to this finished looking piece?
Well, from the beginning, all you have to do is a lot of sanding, a lot of prep work, and planning out in advance. Like the helmet was finished with body filler such as Bondo, and lots of hand sanding, getting into all the crooks and nannies that I can get into, but while purposely leaving some pieces behind.
So how long are we talking, you know, in terms of hours of work put into it?
I'd say that was about maybe 24 hours of work into there, on and off, at work and at home.
Okay.
Like, obviously there's some imperfections on there, but I liked it enough to keep it on so that when I go do my weathering on it, it has that nice little worn, torn, battle damage
organic look.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So, I mean, this is not for someone else. This is your own personal set.
Yes, this is exactly for that. It's sized to fit my large noggin.
Okay, so how did you size that? Like, how do you know when you download that 3D print that it would fit you? Like, what do you do to get it to that sizing?
Well, I use a program called ARMORSMITH, and it allows you to input all your measurements, ranging from the circumference of your head, length of your arms, even your hands. It goes into so much detail on every single nook and cranny of your body.
So there's a digital representation of you in the program, which you measured out, and then you can fit almost anything to you, right?
Yeah, like, essentially, as long as you put your sizing in correctly, you can pretty much adjust everything to fit you adequately, within reason. Like, sometimes you just may not get the proper position of where your nose is. Right. God knows I've done that a few times.
Now, is that program specifically for 3D printing, or is that, you know, for other types of, you know, manufacturing as well?
You can use it for 3D printing. I know it's targeted directly towards cosplayers, which is great. And I even used it in the industry to size up certain people to give them a proper scaling of things. So say that we had something very tiny that came in as a 3D model, but we wanted to scale it up and just wanted to get a basic idea. I drop in that model against my own mannequin inside the program and go, okay, we can increase it here, make it taller, make it smaller. And then they get a better visual idea of representation because they can see how it is. So say that we had something that was small and we wanted it to be knee height to me.
Mhm.
Drop it in there, scale it up before going to 3D printing it or even try to see about manufacturing it.
Right. Wow, that makes it a lot easier. Everything's gone digital. But it didn't start out like this. And
No.
I've heard from you that you started around 20 years ago. Tell me a little bit about that story and what set you on this path.
Well, 20 years ago, I was still in high school in London, Ontario at Beale Secondary. And I found a blueprint for one of my favorite characters, lightsabers from the LucasArts game Star Wars Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2, which happens to be this saber right here. I harassed my machine shop teacher for weeks on end. He gave me a student to shadow, observe, follow around just to see how the process is done, and I got a chance to do a little bit of machining myself. That was mainly because of safety issue, because technically I wasn't allowed to be in the machine shop because I was only in grade 10, and you have to be in grade 11 and 12 to do that.
And that is actually made of aluminum.
Yeah, that is a solid aluminum. Like, I'm just going to grab that there for a sec.
Perfect.
This is a solid piece of aluminum T6. It was spun on an industrial machine called a lathe, and it was a lathe essentially just spins it rapidly in one direction as you have a cutter that'll go along removing material layers at a time until you get to the height that you want. Then I did this little thumb button piece here myself because I didn't want to keep bugging the students to do it. Out of another chunk of aluminum that was machined with a saw, and that took hours on it.
I gotta say, there's definitely like a very distinct feeling holding a metal, lightsaber hilt. It's definitely like none other, because it's so visceral in your hands.
Yeah.
I can see how you've got that, and then you got obsessed with it and started going with it.
Yeah, and I've made things from Kingdom Hearts, such as the Keyblade for a friend of mine in high school. Shortly after I made that guy, then I started making stuff for other people in school. I had teachers approach me saying, "Hey, take my class next year. You're going to benefit from our business course, the law course, everything out there." I had teachers encouraging me and inspiring me and just giving me proper set of directions. It was almost like it was pretty much preset for me. That
it was your destiny to do this. Yeah.
Like, I even got to meet Paul Haggis, the producer of $1 Million Baby and Crash, because he was an actual graduate of my school. And
Wow.
He was an amazing person just to chat with, to figure out if this was the industry I wanted to work in.
So, I mean, there's almost like two sides to this. One is like the manufacturing portion, and then the other, you're also extremely interested in the film industry.
Yep.
And you've kind of brushed a little bit about that. From, that original saber, I guess what I'm asking is, in the community, you've told me that, you can be considered a sabersmith.
Yes.
What does it take to be considered a sabersmith?
Well, in my opinion, there's many levels of what a person can be considered to be a sabersmith. You have the people that will just buy empty kits from companies such as 89 Sabers, Corbanth, and you just get what's known as empties. Like, this is a beginning kit for a Episode 3 Darth Vader saber. Just throw plastic around everywhere. And they manufacture these empty lightsabers for people to install their own components. And that's designing their own chassis, ordering it from another company to design it.
Customize it.
Exactly however they want.
Right.
And it can range anything from simple piece of plastic in there holding up the electronics to a full smorgasbord of a chassis design.
Right. So do you have any examples of, ones that you've kind of customized like that, or?
Yeah, I have plenty of examples on my Facebook page as well as my Instagram, showing my this one install I just did of a Graflex lightsaber, also known as Luke's lightsaber, that had custom pieces made both on my Carbide 3D's Nomad machine and the Form 3L's resin printer to create an interesting sleeve, a great chassis. It was absolutely gorgeous, especially the crystal chamber when it was lit up. It was just
Right. So this is obviously not just a hobby for you anymore.
No.
I mean, it started like that. Now it's a business.
Yep.
It
got me my career too.
That's exactly what I want to talk about is, you have both you're both an entrepreneur because this is your own business, DaleSabers.
Yeah.
But you're also passionate, into the film industry as well. So maybe I'll get you to, tell us a little bit about what you've done in that industry.
Sure. Well, I've been with my union for about almost 10 years now, I'd say. Like, I don't remember the exact date because it just blurs together because I've been enjoying it so much. I'm with the local IATSE 873 union, which is the union here in Toronto for dealing with the film, television, media production, a lot stuff like that. In my category, I'm in the props, set deck, and greens department, and we're pretty much just the people that make things look great on the background here. Like what have here, this would be what I would come in, decorate, throw things around, dress the set, as it were.
Yeah. And so this is a professional thing for you, and it definitely goes hand in hand with what you've been doing before.
Yes.
But can you tell a little bit more about, some of the cool experiences you've had in the film industry that maybe you've brought some of your own characteristics from 3D printing and technology into the mix?
Yeah, I can certainly talk about that. Like, I remember getting my first printer back on the first season of Shadowhunters, as well as my first CNC machine, and just cutting out certain elements and bringing stuff in there. Like on Shadowhunters, I was 3D printing little small pieces to help out the props department, especially doing the wax seals for an episode in season 2. Designing it up for the first time doing AutoCAD. A lot of firsts for me in that season.
Yeah, and a lot of people may not know because they don't have a lot of experience in the film industry, but is 3D printing or other manufacturing methods common, in the props department?
No, especially not in the props department for a lot of people. Like a lot of them will not have their own equipment, such as myself.
So I would say you're somewhat of a trendsetter because you're bringing in your own equipment and being able to do this a lot faster than you did before.
If you want to call it trend setting, it could be trend setting. I don't know for sure, but...
Okay, so let me ask you this
Sure.
to define that. Has anybody followed, in your footsteps and, adopting more 3D printing and those manufacturing techniques?
I would say yes. Like, from my experience working on Star Trek Discovery, I originally brought in my Pro 2 for that show, but I withdrew my commitment to that show due to conflicts with the scheduling.
Right.
And then next thing you know, I'm being told that they're bringing their own Pro 2s, and I'm going, did something just happen here? And now here I am on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and they bring in the exact same machines I was going to bring in anyway.
So do they treat you as the expert? So they're like, well, now that we have these machines, can you work them for me?
Yeah, I basically became the 3D print guru monkey, I would say, in my department, because I'm getting asked all the time, can we print this? Can we CNC this? It became so much of a joke that I laughed that my title now here is going to be the automated operator.
Right.
And somehow it's actually on my badge. Like it's
automated operator.
It's on my name tag here. If you pull that out nice.
That's awesome. Yep, that's what it says. So in terms of, 3D printing, what kind of stuff are you doing on set, such as on Star Trek, that is, maybe different from what you're doing personally? I guess the question is, how have they adopted the technology? Like, is it just a small part, or is it growing to be a bigger part because it's more critical and faster?
That is a very good question, and it's a mixed answer, unfortunately. Like with the 3D printing I'm doing for Strange New Worlds right now, I'm doing up a lot of small pieces that would just take too long to make a mold of, or to manufacture, or try to source. And a lot of times you just don't get the flair of creativity with the programs. And that's where using programs such as Fusion 360 comes in handy, because then I can just size everything up, make quick changes here and there, especially if there's an issue with a light or a pipe. If they want to have something recessed or they want to mount something inside, I can just easily open that model up and go, whoop, okay.
So is there a priority put on either speed? I mean, obviously you're always dealing with crunch timelines, but is there a priority put on speed or creativity or like customization? Like, how do you balance out those needs from the art department?
Well, generally I have a bit of free reign when it comes to certain pieces, but I get a general idea. They give me a quick sketch or concept, and then I'll just work it from there. But if something that comes directly from the art department, they will generally make their own model.
Okay.
And then send that off to myself or their own 3D printer guy to make those parts.
Right. And how do you schedule, like, is there oh, I have 3 machines, so I know my capacity is like this. None of you guys can touch it. Like, is there any of that going on, within that department? Or are they pretty much leaving it up to you?
They pretty much leave it up to me. Like, I will set the profiles for terms of productivity, the orientation for making sure that we have the speed there and making sure that we have everything needed to process it all.
Okay.
Like, I know that a lot of times it's a matter of time versus quality. And if I have to print up multiple pieces and I have all 3 machines free and it's faster just to print on separate machines, I'll print it on separate machines.
Do you get any pushback ever? Like someone going, I don't know what these machines do, so I don't really trust it, in terms of reliability or things like that?
In the beginning, yes, especially not on this show, but when a lot of people were first starting to get to know me. They were unsure about the machine's capacities or capabilities. And then it's just like, oh, no, I got your armor right here.
Right.
Or, oh, no, I have your new pistol right here.
Right. So you did have to kind of educate the crew and show them and prove to them, what was possible and the timelines that it was possible and the detail and quality.
Yeah, like a great example would be these holocrons I'm working on right now for my own personal run. Like, on my Form 3 that I picked up from you guys, a lot of people would not believe that this was 3D printed.
Right.
Because there's no layer lines.
And all in one piece, right?
Yeah. And all those little details on here, I couldn't get on a regular FDM printer. That's why I decided to try using a resin printer for this thing so that I can get all that little detail on it.
Now, if you were to contrast that with traditional methods, how long would have that taken in a more traditional method, and how would you even, go about doing that?
Well, the most traditional method, from my experience, would have been to have somebody cut it out with a laser, do the engraving on it, either by hand or with a laser cutter as well.
Right.
And then add additional parts to layer it.
Right. And then assemble it and then mold it, I guess?
Yeah, and that unfortunately can take a lot more time. And you can have goof-offs with the paint or the glues holding it all together. And sometimes just trying to get the angles to touch right without it falling apart can just be problematic.
Yeah, because that looks like an amazing piece. And I'm just surprised you just told me that was just a personal piece that you wanted, because I guess now there isn't that much of a difference, between going from doing something for yourself to a level that you're super happy with to doing something professional where you get paid for.
Yeah, like I absolutely love making stuff, and I've always been a maker. From even what my parents have told me, that as a kid I was always just pretending something with something else, making something for one of my toys to go with it, and it was just a crazy thing.
Okay, awesome. So I want to switch gears a little bit right now,
Sure.
because we kind of went from talking about your career in film, and let's get back to some personal projects and your own business.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of the awesome pieces that you brought with us, and maybe break it down into, what you've done and contributed as a Sabersmith, and what you're most proud of.
Well, definitely one of my proud features here is the saber I have on display right here in the center. This was my first attempt at installing what's known as a Profi board, done by Frederick Hub. And Profis are basically a open source soundboard system that allows folks to have a wide range of blade effects for their lightsabers.
Right.
And this includes sound and all the fun stuff that you get just to have that strong feel in there.
Yeah, I think people, underestimate, well, at least if I would underestimate, the sound of a lightsaber as part of the experience, right? Because you get the light, you get the feel of the saber, but without the sound, you'd have to do it yourself.
It's just a glorified flashlight without the sound.
True, yeah. So, okay, tell me a little bit more about that. So that's actually made in aluminum.
Yeah, this is made from aluminum, just like the first one there. This was acid etched with ferric chloride to get all the scaling patterns in my wife's online handle written on here. And the way that this process was done is that we actually took a vinyl to act as a resist to stop the acid from eating away.
Right.
And just making out the pattern on here to fit how she wanted it to be.
So that's a lot of custom manual work.
That is a lot of work, especially just laying out every single piece of these scale parts here. And that can be just so tedious. It can be painstaking, especially if you don't line it up right.
So is this a one of a kind? You're only going to do one of these?
Yes, this is the wife's only one that I'm not doing anymore
Right.
of this style. Especially with the work that we put on the inside here. So I'm just going to unscrew this guy.
That's awesome.
So we actually did up a custom resin printed crystal chamber here. And the main chassis part here was actually helped by a friend of mine, Albert Flores. I think it's a Smuggler's Outpost of his company. Or, I'm really bad with names, unfortunately. But okay. Albert did a great design, helping with a base chassis to hold 2 18650 battery cells so that it can light up the crystal chamber there.
Right.
And the nice thing about these guys is that they have the capacity to change the colors pretty much on the fly.
So when you're thinking about even just starting this project, do you model it all first in 3D? Or is it a little bit more of an organic experience, like you'll try to fit things in afterward?
I will do a mix, like especially depending on how I'm feeling about the saber itself. Like I'll first start out with just a basic drawing, just to get an idea of where I want the saber to look like. Because sometimes it just doesn't translate well when you're doing it as a model, and you just have the quick little sketch up going, okay, yeah. No, I like this. I like to have the flow here.
Probably feels a little bit more artistic as well, right?
Yeah. And then after I get the settled design, I'll figure out if I'm going to make a 3D rendering and print it just to get a better idea, or I'll just wing it.
Yeah. And so I see you use a lot of CNC along with 3D printing.
Yeah.
When do you decide, which technology to use, and do you have a preference? Do you say, hey, I like CNC a lot more because it gives me metal?
Well, I will use the machines depending on what needs to be done. And especially what needs to happen with the look of everything too. Obviously, if I have to do up a bunch of multiple pieces that have to line up, it's easier for me just to CNC it. Especially if it's like stuff for the crystal chambers. I will always get that CNC'd if it has a complicated design to it.
Right.
Like the Graflex saber, going back to that one I'm talking about, that actually was CNC'd for the crystal chamber with the little prongs I'm going to have on there. That was all hand filed.
Okay, so a lot of work even if you CNC it.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to talk about what other people have commissioned you for. That's a personal project of yours.
Yep.
But what do you do for your clients and customers? First of all, I guess what can they request from you? Do you mainly do commissions? Do you have some standard sabers that you make for them?
No,
How does that work?
I pretty much do commission builds. And a lot of people lately have just been having me do commission installs using the empty saber kits that I had shown earlier, using other people's empties, for example. Like the graphics I'm again referring to was a empty saber coming from 89 Sabers, and they would send me that, or they'd send me a saber from Ultimate Works. Like I have a Waddle's Junkyard Savage Opress lightsaber waiting for me to install for them.
Okay, that's awesome. So I have a piece here that you made.
Yep.
This is a Lego lightsaber, and it's all in aluminum, lathed out.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about this and maybe that one as well.
Well, both of these sabers were designed up by a buddy of mine named JC, and he was the founder of the lightsaber.com page, which unfortunately isn't around anymore. But he still holds on to the handle of Luke, and that's Luke with 2 U's in honor of the character from the Heir to the Empire comic series written by Timothy Zahn, where that Luke was just a clone.
Okay.
But these were CNC'd out from a local shop here in Canada, and I was just the middle guy just to go around making these things.
Awesome. So there's a lot of customization, there's a lot of options, and basically, people would come to you for their ideas, right? How do you go about talking to those customers and kind of educating them about what you can do and, how to make their ideas into reality?
Well, that's where a lot of my model is basically from concepts to reality. And I will always try to work within what they want to have in terms of finished product. But I will always let them know that if it's not within my capacity, I know somebody that can do it for me. And it's all about networking. And that's one of the beautiful parts about the Saber community, is that we have tons of people with various backgrounds and different skills or training, as well as different experiences. Like my buddy Will Eiling over in BC, he works with patinas quite often, and he's actually been able to make aluminum look like brass, and it's gorgeous.
Right.
Like he uses a patina that will literally change the colors from everything. That's how I got the idea from him for dyeing this saber green.
Right.
Instead of just using it with paint, because paint flakes off.
I love maker communities because they're so creative and they don't let anything stop them as long as they have that tight network of people who are passionate about it.
Yeah, and we always look out for each other. Like we're dealing with a whole bunch of cheap companies or scammers that are taking other people's works and designs, and we will be there to defend one another from being taken advantage of by these companies.
That's what communities are all about.
Yeah.
But I want to get into, if I'm outside of that community right now and I love it, I want to get into it. It's pretty intimidating to get started.
Yes.
What is your advice for being in that industry community for so long, as one of the veterans there, as one of the well-known names? What is your advice for people who want to get started from the ground up doing something?
Ask questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question, and you never know what kind of answers can be given to you from somebody. You just never know.
Yeah, because you guys are so willing to give and to help, right?
Yeah, like a lot of people can be tight-lipped on their plans, especially of a proprietary design, such as the NeoPixel connectors that were made by Dmitry Stock, or just anything in general. Like there's so much people willing to share with you that it's just a great way to learn.
Is there a recommendation for you on how they can get started in terms of just from a fabrication point of view? Should they learn modeling? Should they get a 3D printer? Should they get a CNC? Where does someone start to look at technologies that can help them start producing it? Or maybe you would say, don't even start with technology, start with reading or something like that.
Reading is definitely a good thing for them to do, especially just trying building anything with just practical supplies. Go to your local hardware stores, go to your local toy stores. You never know what you could find. Like this guy here is from a 95 show called Beetleborgs, and this was just painted up. There's no modifications on here. It's just straight painted with a Duralumin paint, and just that's it.
Right.
You never know what you can find, even just from dollar stores or thrift stores.
So do you encourage people who have this dream of, hey, I want to make this, but I don't know how to do it? How do you encourage those guys to eventually get to the point where you are, which is like, not only can I do something for myself, but I can provide advice and help to other people?
The way I encourage them is to just show them my own history. Like I have issues with my hands from being injured years ago, and I can't keep a steady pencil, and it's like mine looks like a doctor's note right now. And it's just a matter of just figuring out what works best for you. Like if you have the money to get yourself a machine, great, but don't just drop $10,000 on a machine that's just you are going to get frustrated with. Talk about it, learn about the machine, learn about its quirks and everything, because you never know. It just might be a passing trend or a fleeting interest.
So I know, the machines are now just tools for you, and you have a lot of new tools that you get to play with on a regular basis. But let's talk a little bit about that. Your transition from having a lot less access to machines like 10, 20 years ago to now where you have a 3L, you have a Pro 2, you have a CNC.
Yep.
How did that transition happen? Was it fairly quick? And how does that change the way that you do things?
The transition from having barely any equipment to nearly all the toys in the world I would want took a lot of time, and it took a lot of sacrifice and patience. Like this just isn't something you hop into overnight. Like you have to be able to learn how to do everything. You need to be able to do your research. There are so many things that can easily go wrong with anything that you do. Lord knows I've broken my fair share of tool bits on the CNCs, or had something crash because I couldn't figure out something properly. It's just a matter of taking your time with it, and you're not going to be Adam Savage right out the get-go. You need to be able to figure out everything and just have some patience and have fun with it too.
Yeah. So it sounds like that, to be in and, to excel in the community, you have to both be a learner and an educator. Tell me a little bit about your experience in kind of mentoring other people into the community.
Well, I actually have a student of mine. He's about 50 years old, and you would never expect a 50-year-old to come learn from a 30-something like myself over something that he may or may not have experience with. And a lot of times I'm just teaching him the basic safeties when it comes to certain materials. Like when I'm teaching him on the lathe, I have to teach him to keep things away from the chuck as much as possible, because if your hand goes in there, you have a necklace, your long hair, you're dead. That thing will kill you.
Right.
So it's all a matter of just being safe with the machines and knowing as well what material needs to be at certain speeds. Because if you're spinning something, say that is very thin wall, and you cut it wrong, that piece is going to come up and take an eye out, cut you badly, or straight up kill you.
So would it be fair for me to say that the entry into 3D printing may be a little bit easier than the CNC route?
I would definitely say 3D printing can be easier, especially since you don't have to worry about anything flying at your face or having to worry about certain materials for feeds and speeds. But the same thing can be said for 3D printing. Like if you don't have anything set properly in there, you risk the extruder clogging up and just having a mess there, and not what you wanted to begin with. Lord knows I've done that a fair number of times in the beginning.
We've all done that. I mean, if you've been 3D printing, you've done that.
Yeah, like I started out with just using a tiny little printer, which was just garbage for me. Right. I couldn't get the thing to even stay down on the print bed no matter what I did. I used the hairspray, I used the glue, the painter's tape, everything, and I could not get the thing to set out right. So I decided to say, screw it, this is too much of a thing I can see happening here, and I want to be able to make myself unique amongst all my other workers and people in the community, saber community. So I decided to buy myself a MakerBot, the 5th generation one, if I remember correctly.
Right, the Replicator.
Yeah, Replicator Plus. And that changed around so much for me that it just started becoming part of my normal kit, that people asking, are you bringing your printer? Are you bringing this? Are you bringing this?
Yeah. So as you got higher in scale in terms of 3D printing gear, do you feel like you think about it less because it's just easier to use, or do you think about it more as in, oh, do I need one level up even higher? Like, how does that thinking go when you start acquiring 3D printing gear?
Well, it's always starting out with me, start small, because you never know if it's just going to be a wasted investment, especially if you're dropping $10,000 on a machine that's just going to sit in the corner and gather dust and not make any money for you or do anything that you want it to. Lord knows, like right now, I have a printer that is just sitting in the corner because the screens on it burn out after 50 hours. And I was so miffed about that. It wasn't even funny. Like,
so your life changed when you switched over to the 3L.
Yes, after upgrading from my Anycubic Photon S and going to the 3L, it was great.
Now that's a big jump. So tell me a little bit about the experience of, from a Anycubic to a 3L, because when does someone decide to say, hey, I'm gonna go all out, I'm gonna get the biggest, prosumer professional printer there is available to me?
I would definitely say it has to fit when you need to fit it, because a lot of people can easily get away with using an EPAX machine, or they can continue using Anycubic machines, Elegoo. It's all about what fits best for you and what your needs are, because nothing says that the 3L works for somebody else, but it works for me because it fits with what I needed to do.
And so I want to contrast this a little bit with CNC and 3D printing. When do you decide, which to invest in and which is the right tool between CNC and 3D printing? Maybe tell me a little bit about, what you've done in CNC that couldn't have been done with 3D printing and vice versa.
Well, going back to an earlier piece, I'm not sure if I showed it earlier, but this guy here originally started out with just as a 3D print. And that's because I couldn't do the CNC work and I didn't have the education to do so. And the way I got this guy cut was using a technique known as a poor man fourth axis. And that was taking a square stock of material that was just enough to fit on my machine and then cutting it out, flipping it on each of its faces so I can get the cut.
That must have been a little bit unnerving, because one mistake and you have to start over again.
Oh yeah, like Lord knows that this is not clean cuts here. Like there's so many misalignments there. Like there's a nice gouge here, and that was just from a slight offset of the material. Like even though the machine was read off as properly squared, and I could have easily messed up on my facing of the material, just because of the size of the billet doesn't mean it's going to fit everywhere. And machines can slip, it can have a slight offset.
But that's pretty much the only way you're going to be able to get that metal piece, right?
Yes and no. A lot of people have actually been able to do lost wax casting, and they can do that with 3D prints now, which is great.
So why didn't you do that then?
Well, because I don't have the experience, and nor was I comfortable with doing that right now.
Right.
Like at the time of making this guy, I was still learning how to do that stuff. And on Star Trek right now, I actually managed to make a full replacement for a piece on the bridge of the Enterprise, which I can't really say which is which. That's for you guys to discover.
Right. That's awesome. We're going to be looking out for that.
Yeah.
So in terms of 3D printing, we've talked about, CNC and 3D printing and that contrast. But if I were to say, you started 10 years ago, you didn't have all these tools. 5 years from now, where do you think we'll be, and what kind of tools do you think, or progress that we'll have in 3D printing that would change the way you do things now?
Well, I would definitely say that with the level of technology with metal 3D printing that's going on right now, is drastically changing, and it's making it more affordable for a lot of people, but it's the matter of the post-processing on it. Like even as it is with a 3D print, you're still going to have the layer lines, and you're still not going to be able to get full clean finishes, because you're just going to see everything. And it's the same thing, even if it was a SLS machine doing the powder printing of metal together, you're still going to get the rough coarseness there. You're not going to get a mirror polish.
Yeah, I think it gets better and better, but there'll always be some post-processing. Do you feel like there's a little bit of a gap between, the resources available for 3D printing, which of course, we do a lot of content for 3D printing, we provide a lot of information, versus, post-processing 3D prints, and maybe there's a gap in that knowledge?
Yeah, there can be a gap, especially for the post-processing. I had people recently show me using the Elegoo or the Anycubic UV resins to finish up on FDM prints.
Okay.
And that saves me a whole lot of time and some headaches of just applying Bondo to everything. But I still will go in with spot putty and fill in little gaps that I can't get in, or just to save myself on the wasting the material with brushes and whatnot.
Do you think it's because it's more glamorous to be 3D printing this big part versus sanding it and bondoing it? Like, does that factor in?
It can and can't. The glamour work of finishing up prints is definitely problematic, especially with all the dust vapor from the sanding. You have to wear the respirators and make sure you're not breathing in the powders, because that's just going to be hazardous to your health. Lord knows I'm terrible for not wearing a respirator or at least a mask when I'm doing some of my printing. But at least I try to do it outdoors and be downwind so that the stuff's blowing away from me.
So what about you? We've talked about where technology might be, a couple years down the road. For you, maybe a couple years down the road, what are you going to be concentrating on? Where do you think you'll be moving to? If there's any changes, what have you planned in the next couple of years that we can look forward to?
Honestly, I don't know where things are going on. Things can easily change for me at the drop of a dime. Like, I never fully expected to buy a Form 3 machine, and 5 years ago, I never expected to buy myself a Pro 2. Things will always change, and it's just a matter of fitting the needs of that time and expanding on that too. Like, I could see myself easily buying a fourth axis CNC machine from Tormach, or going out and getting one from anybody. Like, even my current supplies right now, Carbide 3D could easily come out with a fourth axis attachment for their Shape Okos or for the Nomads. Everything's always changing. You can never predict anything.
So if I were to kind of focus back on your business of lightsabers, because that's the name of your business, and I were to say, how much time does it take you to go from conception to having one in your hand, in terms of planning it out, modeling it in CAD, prototyping, finishing, and so forth? Can you give me a breakdown of how much you spend on, each one?
That is a very difficult question, because each one is all custom per the customer. If I'm just doing an install, it can take me a couple of months because of my time frame with the film industry. Like, that is my priority. The saber stuff is just the secondary. but I always put as much time and dedication to it as I can, as I would when I'm working in the industry. And if I'm doing a scratch build saber, that can take me months to do, because things can change. If I don't like the feel of something in my hands, I will just chuck it back on the lathe and work it again until it fits right. And if it doesn't fit right for me, may not fit right for the customer. Like, I went through a couple of revisions on my wife's saber staff to get it the way that she wants it. Originally, there was a control box on this guy for her, but she didn't like it because it was a interference for her, especially to do twirls and whatnot.
Right.
For me, that box there was a nice hold and stop, because it gives me a point of reference to go off to, so that I can use my fingers to ignite the sabers and change effects. But I was still able to get that effect done with just applying on two little tactiles underneath everything.
So, you're talking months at a time working on lightsabers. So in a year, you might only get 2, 3?
Even, 3 at most, depending on how busy I am. But if I have a open schedule like I did during the shutdown, I can bang out quite a few. But it's also a matter of the complexity of the saber design. Like, I've been working on the saber that this guy is for years.
Right.
Because I'm always trying to refine it, trying to figure out what I'm trying to do to make things better for it, and how to transition from 3D prints into full metal.
I can see that there's, this huge passion of like doing it right, getting it perfect, and mastering that craft and that art within your work. And I guess now we see that there's an exclusivity factor, because there's only a couple of these, per year that we're able to see. Where do you share all of your progress and so forth?
I share it all on my company profile page on Facebook and my Instagram. And if I don't have it on there, I'll put it up on the lightsaber community groups, such as the Lightsaber Society of Canada, Universal Lightsaber Community, and I will also even share my progress on the Saber Builders Academy, where I help guide people to manufacture their own. Give them tips on finding parts from hardware stores, found parts from a scrapyard. You just never know where you can find anything that can make your saber what you want it to be.
That's a great place to start looking for your work and getting inspired to do something of their own. In terms of the film industry, that's your primary, role right now. What more would you want to do within that community if you have any aspirations? Where do you think that will be? Because technology might change, roles might change, they might adapt more technology. How do you foresee that going forward in the film industry?
I can definitely see it progressing a lot more. Like, I'm bringing in a lot of technology that a lot of people had never considered before, especially for shows such as Star Trek. Like, any of the sci-fi shows such as The Boys, Titans, Gotham Knights, all those shows are bringing in more technology that, as you said earlier, trendsetters such as myself are bringing in. Like, I brought in technology from the lightsabers using these micro LEDs here for special effects on costumes that are used originally, or just point them out to our lighting guys and say, hey, we have these nice little LEDs here that can cause effects such as breathing if we want to have it on a prop piece.
That's awesome. It's kind of ironic, because we're talking about, trend setting and bringing in technology of 3D printing, to a set like Star Trek, when probably all of us was inspired, to think about 3D printing as something that we saw in Star Trek with their replicators. So
exactly,
maybe it's kind of gone all full circle, right?
It's quite possible. Like, Lord knows, like Shatner made a documentary years ago called "How Star Trek Changed the World." We have non-invasive scanners now because of these the medical scanners from Bones and whatnot, using it on somebody.
Yeah,
we're starting to get hologram technology, and next thing you know, we're going to get the Doctor in here. I'm just waiting for Albert Picardo to come around.
Totally. So I think this is a great segue for us to kind of wrap it up.
I would agree so.
Brandon Dale, you shared so much with us. Your work, your artistry, your craft. Where can people find you if they want to see more of what you've done?
They can find me up on Facebook and Instagram. For Facebook, it's www.facebook.com/DaleSabers. And for Instagram, it's at DaleSabers. Like just even Googling DaleSabers will find me pretty much everywhere, from the RPF to your props to Facebook.
That's great. I encourage everybody watching this who's interested to do so. Google you and find more of your work. Thank you for joining us today and bringing all of your work and craft and your knowledge and your willingness to share your passion.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's been quite the fun time here.
Awesome.
Just reflecting back on everything that's happened from my humble beginnings to where I am right now.
And who knows where we'll be in a couple of years.
Yeah, for all I know, I could be down working for Stan Winston.
There you go. Thank you for joining us. This is our episode of Talk3D with DaleSabers.
Have a good one, guys.